time before we record, be like, hold on, we're going to check this thing.
Yes. We're just going to have to run a test and I'm going to have to listen to it.
That's right. So we're live on Facebook inside the community. We are talking about technology and all of its challenges and how I cannot hear. I can't tell the difference between a dog whistle and a whistle. I don't know the difference. They're the same.
It just boggles my mind. I don't know how to help you, but we're gonna figure it out. But you can hear me okay now.
It's old A. When you get old, one of the first things starts to go is your eyes. Right behind that comes your hearing.
Well, I went to the eye doctor the other day, right? Yeah. And I am almost mid-40s.
Okay. Getting there.
So I go to the eye doctor, and the guy's like 19. No, really, he's right. Very young.
Doogie Howser.
He's such an awesome doctor. He's so nice. And he was like, now, the muscle is deteriorating in your eye. And he said, now I don't want you to be alarmed.
Don't be scared.
Because from now until 60, it's only going to do, and there's nothing I can do to slow that down.
Just going to happen.
I was like, well, thank God there's other things I can do to slow down the aging process.
I tell you, the most hopeful part of that conversation right there is I'm going, well, dang, I only have to do that for 10 more years and I'm out of the woods. 60, it's all good.
You're so crazy. We're going to stop talking about your age because you talk like a 85-year-old man.
So funny. Reese would tell you I've been doing that for decades.
Well, we got to stop it. We got to slow down Shane's aging by stopping his conversation with himself.
Changing the vocabulary. Speaking of changing, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about here today. I'm excited. I am really excited about this conversation that we're going to jump into a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, me too. I am too. And I'm telling you what, if you guys will really listen and act on what we're telling you today. If you want 2021 to be the best year yet, then you have to hear what we are going to say to you today. And honestly, if you will do what we're telling you to do, you will set yourself up for an incredible, dream-fulfilling 2021. I can guarantee that. So hear me when I tell you, every single day, become an agile human that has an agile business. Please hear me when I tell you that. I'm going to unpack that for you because when I was younger, I have a sister and she lives with severe brain damage. Shane, you haven't met Catherine, have you?
I have not. I've only seen pictures.
Yes. Okay. So Catherine was born with no birth defect, no brain damage. But as she came out of my mother's body, she was handed to a nurse in the delivery room that was so intoxicated that she suffocated my sister to death. And no one knew it was happening. Can you imagine?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
After having 2 children of my own, I can't imagine the horror once my mother realized what was happening. Yeah, I cannot. I try to put myself in that position, and things are so different now than they were when Catherine was born. But the reality is that still should not have happened.
No.
But that experience clearly disturbed our life, right? It changed everything. I mean, Catherine lived virtually on the edge of death every single night for the first 5 years of her life. We slept with clothes at the end of our bed because there could be any moment that she would have a grand mal seizure, and the time that it would take the ambulance to get to us and get her to the hospital, she would die. So my dad just said, everybody's got to sleep with clothes on the end of their bed because we all have to get up and go. And so
moment's notice, yeah.
Right. So it really taught me, Catherine's experience in this life taught me how to be flexible. It taught me that things can change at the drop of a hat, right? It taught me to think in angles and patterns because once I got older and I started to watch my sister's behavior, if you followed her behaviors, you could catch one of these seizures before they happened.
Which just, you could see it coming, really.
Yes. Yes. So there were patterns of her behavior that would change, and she would behave the same way right before a seizure would come on. It also taught me how dynamic people are when they are properly connected. They're in their designated place on the team, and how that dynamic integration of humans and their talent could literally change a physical life. I mean, Catherine was not supposed to live past the age of 11, Shane. And she's, let's see, she's 39.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah, she was not supposed to ever walk or talk or function as a human being. That is how severe her brain damage is. She rides horses. She has a job. She
Got a
can
beautiful
feed
smile
herself.
too. Got a
Right?
beautiful smile too. Yeah.
She does. She does. And she and Catherine, or she and Presley, and now she and Abigail have the most exciting conversations over FaceTime. I'm gonna tell you that right now. She's very quick to tell them, you listen to your mother.
It's great. It's great.
Oh,
What an
gosh.
advocate. What an advocate.
Right? Yes. But I'm telling you, if I had been rigid, Catherine would have been a problem in my life, right? But if I wanted to enjoy her, and if I wanted to grow up in a household that allowed me to celebrate my sister, then I had to learn that my life was not about me anymore. There was somebody else in the house that needed something more than I did. And honestly, it gave me the power of agility. It gave me the power to be flexible. It gave me the power to make fast decisions on my feet. It gave me the power to accommodate somebody else's needs before my own. And that is what agility is. An agile system acts just like what I described. And ultimately what it gives you is stability. So I knew I can't control what might happen to my sister, but I could make myself agile and flexible enough, and that gave me emotional stability. Does that make sense?
Totally does. It reminds me of, you and I are both people of faith. And one of the parts of our faith is putting other people before ourselves. And one of the ways we express that is by going and serving in countries where, things are not stable. I mean, stable is the last thing that I would think about when I think about a country like Honduras, and so when I go on trips like that, I keep reminding myself, you know what? Flexibility is the name of the game. Agile, mobile. You don't ever know what's going to be coming. But when you come with that type of an attitude, regardless of what comes my way, I'm going to respond, not react. I'm going to respond to it in that moment, right? Like it gives you a sense of peace. It really does.
Because the reality is the opposite of an agile human in an agile system is a rigidity. It is slow because there's not an expectation that things are going to change.
Oh yeah.
There is only an
feared.
Yes. And there's only an expectation that I'm fully in control. So sorry. That's just not the truth.
Wouldn't that be
then
great?
it makes things clumsy. It makes our reaction time clumsy. Systems can become clumsy and clunky and hard to move and hard to flex with their environment. And I'm telling all of you today, if you will stop being a person that is building a business that you are a slave to, you are on your way to building an agile business, because agile companies understand that agile is not something you do, it's something you become. You have to evolve into an agile business and become an agile human. I mean, honestly, there is some clear indicators when I'm talking to people and when I I can walk into a business, I can spend 5 or 10 minutes with the owners and the leaders of that business, and I can tell you if they are rigid and stiff and clumsy and slow, or if they are fast and flexible and ready to go.
That's a poem. I love that.
It is.
That's good.
so crazy.
That's good.
Right. But you've heard this. You've
Mhm.
been in an organization like this. You've been this human. And so have I, because owners and people that do not have agile lives and businesses have these things in common. They've created this model and this life that requires only them at the center of everything. Only they can deal with client matters. Only they can make the final decision. Only they can answer the question. Know what I'm talking about?
Right on.
They can't outsource or hire help. So because everything is centralized on them, now they find themselves in a mess most often that they can't outsource help to help them declutter because they don't have enough margin. They don't have enough margin of time, and they certainly don't have enough margin of cash. They can't invest time on the business because they're stuck in the day-to-day nonsense of the business. I mean, I'm so sorry. You don't have to make the final decision on if we can buy these paper towels from Staples or these paper towels from the BJ's or Costco, right? You don't have to do that, but an owner that has put themselves at the center of everything, they're making those kind of decisions. So they can't invest time on the business because they're stuck in it. They certainly cannot take time away for vacation because the phone is definitely going to ring. And guess what? They're the only ones that can solve the problem on the other end. There's nobody else that could answer the phone for them so they can have downtime. And finally, they have no liquid cash to even experiment change, or if something needs to change, like if a lead generator suddenly stops and drops out, they don't have the flexibility. They don't have an agile business that can flex with change because it's so centralized and clumsy, really, which ultimately is creating a life and a business that demands almost all of their time and all of their cash. Now, Shane, I'm constantly asking myself this question. And from a coaching perspective, I'd be really interested to hear just your take on this and what you have found to be true in your own coaching conversations. But why would somebody choose to create a business and a life that they're a slave to?
Happens all the time. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is they love comfort. Like somebody told me one time, the only constant is change, right? But someone who is so rigid fights against change so much that they would rather just sit in the boiling pot of hot water that's just been graduated, getting hotter and hotter, hotter over time, than to get out and save themselves. Like, so too comfortable with knowing it all, too comfortable with being the guy or girl with all the answers, too comfortable with people depending on, they just get too comfortable with this is the way in which things should work. They get too comfortable with expectation, right? So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. The second thing that comes to my mind is they overextend themselves. Right? Because of this mentality of I have to keep things just the way they are, they end up overextending themselves into all of these different areas where there is this dependency that is built and created that they look up one day and they got handcuffs on and they don't realize that they're the officer who put them there. You know what I mean? Like, so they've just been doing this, and they get so overextended that they look up one day and they've been handcuffed to this thing that was once a dream. That was once a passion driver, that was once a thing that they had imagined would one day come true and give them all of this freedom. And then here they are locked into it. The third thing that I was thinking through was, they just don't know how to delegate because they simply relied on their own abilities and it worked. So they relied on their own abilities. This thing worked. And they didn't know how to delegate. And what happened was, because they were the decision, that example of going to the store to get paper towels, is it going to be from Staples or is it going to be from BJ's? I've got one leader I've worked with that I was like, that's that leader. Like, he was so poor at delegating that what he did was dump on people. It's a big difference, right? Dumping on somebody's like, you go get the paper towels, right? Like you're just a paper towel person. Like that's just dumping on somebody. Like we're talking about in Agile Business, you're going to see here in a few minutes, boy, we're talking about you freeing up your people by truly empowering them and delegating to them things of significant responsibility. That's very different than what behaviors trap an owner inside of this business that they created and were so hopeful of when they first started.
Man, dumping and delegating. What
big difference.
A distinction. And really, you know, we have been taught. So there has been a way of doing business for a century. And that shift started to change and started to move away from this old way of doing business, which I'll describe that to you in just a minute, since 2011. But because we are so slow and so stuck in our ways and so clumsy and rigid in our decision making in business and in corporate America, and that's how we're trained, it is taking us so much time to make that shift. But you're starting to see disruptions like coronavirus coming in and forcing people to rethink business models, delivery models, marketing methods, real value in the marketplace, and also realize, wow, we really have not differentiated ourselves and we are dying. Like that's what's happening. And I'll tell you what, this way of doing business for over a century, they called it the scientific management century. And I'll explain to you exactly what that looks like. Because once I describe it to you, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, it's the only way we have known to be in this world, especially from a corporate training perspective. But it's really interesting, Shane, because since 2000, the year 2000, Harvard Business Review, Time Magazine, they've been putting this information on their covers and doing articles and talking about this stuff. I mean, if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you.
Show me.
Let me just show you this.
I mean, I believe you. I just want to see it.
Right? Look, the Agile Executive, this issue was 2000, the year 2000. Let me show you this one. This is a book that was written. You ready? Agile for everybody. Startups, marketers, consultants, executives, enterprises. Look at this one. This is also from the year 2000. I mean, this is just, you guys, we've been studying this and talking about it for 21 years. The work from anywhere future. Wow. Back in 2000, like this is not like a 2020 conversation. Those of us that have been tracking the trends in business and those people that have been running ahead and measuring the patterns in economics and technology have been preparing us for this shift, but this shift is here. I mean, we cannot pretend that this isn't happening because we are no longer in a scientific management century. So this is the idea that came from a guy named Frederick Taylor, which most people don't know about, but his influencer, the guy that brought him in and put his principles that drive scientific management to work was Henry Ford. And the Ford company was the first to use this science method to optimize the production of their labor force. Well, ultimately what it resulted in for Ford was that they were able to reduce the time to assemble cars from 90 minutes to 12. And listen to this, they were able to reduce the cost of one car from $850 to $300.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
And this was the genius of Ford. That's the reason why when he died, people said he was the most powerful human on the planet, because he embraced this machine model of doing business. We are no longer in the machine model of doing business century people. Okay. And the reality is that this machine model served well for 100 years, but what will the next 100 years look like? Well, because of technology, it already looks very different, but we are moving away from things like this, using methods, scientific methods that determine and standardize one best way of doing a job. So prior to 1911 and 1910, manufacturing employees would come to the building, and they would work from the time that they started till the time they ended, no breaks. Okay. So the idea of putting breaks into the employee's day came from Taylor's and Ford's scientific method that showed them, hey, we could get more out of people if they had a break. They would be more productive, right? So then this clear division of tasks and responsibility showed up, because prior to 1911, people were hired based on who they knew and not at all on how well they did the job. But again, because of numbers and this scientific strategy, they were able to say, hey, if we developed and trained these people and we put really good people in the place with proven history of doing their job, we would drive production, which is exactly what they did, because prior to all that, nobody trained or developed their employees. Nobody. And finally, what one of the final principles that drove this scientific management idea was high pay for high performing employees. You see, the scientific management was heavily dependent and centralized on one person that could do that job, one way of doing that job, and only one person that dictated the training and management piece of the business. Well, that is a centralized business. So then what happens is the what is that thing called where you put stuff on the belt and it goes through the machine, it goes through the building and one person touches it. Yes. Right. So think of a conveyor belt. That's what we're talking about. That was one centralized machine and everything flew through it. Well, guess what happened when the conveyor belt broke?
Everything shut down.
Everything shut down. Just like so many, even those of you in this community in 2020, when the conveyor belt of your life came to a screeching halt because you were put under quarantine and you had not yet implemented phase 1 through 6 of Ascend, guess what? You had no income. No income, no impact. You were doing live videos, but you didn't know if they were working. And you were sending some emails, but you didn't know if people were opening them. You didn't see them converting. And the reality is that so many of you have said, hey, unless I can prove my aptitude and how well I do this job and my credibility, I can't charge someone $3,000 to $6,000. You see how that old ingrained way of doing business is plaguing. It's pushing up against this new way that is agile. It's dynamic teams of people that are fluid, and everybody on the team knows their place. And guess what? If I'm not here, somebody can step in and do my job and probably do it better, but I don't have to fear losing it. Make sense?
It totally does.
Because of this digital era, really, we have been transformed into this new way of doing business, but so many people have not adopted it. I mean, literally only 10% of corporations have adopted an agile business system, and only 1% of entrepreneurs. And I'm telling you, the people in that 1% are people like Amazon, are people like Chick-fil-A, are people like us. Just because we are not gazillionaires does not mean we have not adopted an agile business system, because the beauty of an agile business system is we get to control the outcome. So if we want it to go faster, we can. If we want to rein it in, we can. But the reality is it doesn't break. We don't have to stop everything and rebuild every time we want to make a shift, right? It's interesting because agility leads to stability. So in 2021, we are forced to be agile and dynamic at the same time. It is truly a paradox. So the smartphone is a great example of this. So this is a physical device that serves as a stable platform for a vast amount of dynamic applications, providing each of us as a user, with a different and valuable experience. Isn't that powerful?
It's really powerful.
I mean, there are some real tried and true traits of agile people and agile businesses, and I'm going to give those to you because it's important that you understand what an agile business looks like and what an agile life looks like so that you can start to move in that direction and away from this scientific management mindset that has been so trained because it's been passed down. You're talking about 100 years of influence. So your grandparents, your great grandparents, your parents all lived through this century.
It's amazing.
It's a lot of influence.
It's a lot of influence.
So when we talk about the traits of an agile company, what we're talking about is that strategy is less like a business plan that's centralized and more like a North Star. So like for us, when we're talking about a North Star, those metrics are our North Star that helps us say, are we serving the ideal client in a way that they want? And am I staying focused on the reason I'm doing this? Right? Which is not the money. The money and the time freedom is a natural byproduct of strategies focused on a North Star. So like one practical way of thinking about this is flexible resource allocation, like a online program coupled with your one-to-one expertise. So now it gives each user a unique experience. You want to come in and listen to us in today? Great. You want advice from Amy today? Great. You don't? Fine. You don't have to pay me for my time when I'm not in there with you. And you get to dictate the time, the pace. You get to dictate the North Star. I'm not dictating it. Does that make sense, Shane?
It totally does. I hear flexibility and stability, right? I hear the ability to adapt, yet to have this solid foundation. Like I get it. Yeah. Congruency is another word that keeps coming to my mind. But you know, it is interesting though, I was thinking about this idea of strategy being a North Star versus a business plan. And this old way, right? Previous century was like very, very keen on this idea of business planning, right? And they were like the kings and the queens who sat way up there, who got privy to all the stuff. And then other little people, you know, they got just enough information that was for them. And they didn't know what it was they were supposed to do with it. They just did their little part. They didn't know how it was connected to anything else. And then, you know, every year they, whoever they were, met and came up with this other plan, right? So what that bred in employees was this idea that, you know what? I just go as far as I'm told. I just pay attention to what is there. And if you've been in corporate America and now have jumped out into your business owner, I know this is a challenge for you. Like you might be thinking, no, not me. I'm telling you, yes, you, because habitually you have been in this grind of just do what you're told. And so you haven't been able to consider farther out the bigger picture and to consider some of these ideas. That's part of the transition to moving out of this structured, standardized way of thinking to becoming much more agile in the way in which you consider this information. So instead of just saying, you know, somebody's got to give me the next piece of the information before I can move forward, now you start to be able to tap into your own creativity to solve problems at a whole nother level that doesn't depend on anyone. But nobody's taught you that when you've been in this old structure. So when you come into the Ascend community and you begin to experience this new level of flexibility and ownership, it's going to feel like you're dancing with two left feet for a minute. That's okay. You should feel that way, right? That says you're stepping into these new ideas. The other thing that I was thinking about is, you know, when we were in that environment, we kind of had to, you know, to kind of look out and watch out for what was coming next and who was going to say what. And it was all about protecting what was there right now. So it just limited our field of view into this one thing that we cared the most about. And then we said, you know, the heck with everything else. I'm just going to be concerned about my stuff. And that limits your field of focus when you become a business owner, when you have to look at not just that one thing, but all things, right? And you do, Amy, a great job of narrowing those things down to four most important. But if you've been trained to just look at the one you care the most about, you'll easily gravitate to whatever that one is out of the four and think, I'm just going to I'm good. And I'm telling you, that's
Mhm.
not what we're talking about here. We're talking about you
Same.
growing beyond that and seeing
Mhm.
differently.
Mhm. And what that leads to is accelerated decision making, which is the number 2 trait of agile business companies. So, for example, there is rapid iteration and experimentation. Isn't this what I tell you to do at the end of phase 1? Look, just
Yes.
choose a message and get out there and test it. We can experiment and we can change things. But the one thing I find slows people down is I got to get this right because people are going to notice if I'm always changing my message. No, they're not. No, they are not. You see, rapid iteration and experimentation leads to continuous learning and reorientation of performance. This is what allows for confident decision
Oh, that's
making,
powerful.
right?
That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Reorientation. That's a big word. That's a
Yes,
neat
it
word.
is.
So thinking about this idea of reorientation, when the old model, the 100-year model, was like, listen, the guy or girl with the title gets to make the big decisions and to tell you what part you play, right? So you just wait. Well, that decreased the decision making and it increased our fear of getting it wrong, right? Because some of us, were bold enough to step out there and try something and we got whacked over the head and told, no, I'll never try that again, right? So then that decelerates decision making. It centralizes it somewhere other than us and causes us to go into this panic mode whenever we're put on the spot. It's what we feel like whenever we're put on the spot to make a decision, right?
Yep.
So the shift here is, do you remember Skinner? He was a psychologist. Skinner had this crazy little box. They called it the Skinner box. Put these little rats in there. Rat hits a lever, gets a pellet. I'm like, golly, Molly, that was me in corporate work. Hit the lever, get a pellet. Hit the lever, get a pellet. Here's the deal, man. In this new way of doing business, there is always a new box that you are in. And every time you go to get the lever, it's moved. And what comes out is totally different than what came out the last time. You have got to embrace this idea of change as being healthy and not having to have everything already figured out before you get into and start to see where all the variables are. Embracing this idea of you having the creativity to be able to meet whatever challenge is there is something that you can grow into, but it's going to go contrary to everything that you've been taught. Now, the great news is you, Amy, have taken the guesswork out of this and you focus our attention on the things that really matter so that we can relax. I'm telling you, the greatest gift that you gave me when we first met was that gift to be able to just relax a bit, right? Because you put it together and I could just say, at my limited understanding in that moment of time, I was just going to follow the yellow brick road, man. Follow the yellow brick road, right? Well, what I learned was this is not a linear process. This road has many forks in it, and I have the freedom. And now because of your work, the confidence to be able to make those choices, knowing what it is I want most.
I mean, Shane, I have to show this to you. So this is so cool. Someone drew this. And it is what an agile business looks like. And this scares people because it's not linear.
No.
It's not a straight line with do this, now do this, do this, do this. But it is. It is, because here is the reality is right here. You cannot manage adaptively unless you make swift decision making. At the core of an agile business and an agile human is just, we know failure is coming. Let's do it fast. Let's fail fast. We're going to fail together because guess what? We can diplomatically use fear because we both want what is about to happen. We're not like, it was not my goal to prove myself right to you. When you were scared, it was Shane. I want the same thing you do for yourself. So if you will just lean in here and trust me, we are going to fail fast. We're just going to throw this language out there. We're going to measure it. We're going to reiterate it. And we did that 3 times in 10 days. And on the 17th day, homeboy sold how much? $8 grand?
$8 grand.
$8 grand.
My highest sale before that was $1,000.
I mean, and 10 days later, and this was all between Christmas and New Year's, 10 days later, it was another 10.
Day after Christmas. Craziness.
Yes. And this is this waterfall model, they call it here, is constant communication and feedback loops. How many times a day are we talking? We have a standing morning meeting, standing, man. And I don't know, we're always standing in different places in our houses, but we are standing and talking. Okay,
Right.
This is the numbers. This is what they're saying. This is what we need to do. Okay, Facebook ads are starting to atrophy. Here's the next strategy. You know what? We've got a little bit of time, but we need to get this strategy implemented. And this is what I need from you. And this is what you need from me. And then we've got these other teams out here that we're trying to integrate into this agile process that think they're agile, but they're not. So we're trying to show them with a lot of patience. Come on, guys, we're just going to get in here. We're going to fail fast. We pay you. We're paying you to fail. Let's get in there.
Let's go.
Going, right?
Yeah.
Because the third most powerful trait of these agile businesses is technology. So they know that the new way of adopting and implementing the next generation of technology and development matters. So that is what happens from phase 3 all the way through 6, is I've given you this new way of getting the information in, experimenting, and extracting the data as fast as you can so you can get to 3, 4, 5, and 6 and start to automate, right? Because we want the same things. We're trying to get the system up and running, and technology requires speed and dependability. Those are the two things. Everything is optimized for those two things. And it is a big mind shift, is it not?
It is. It is. I think back to a phrase I heard one time: when the facts are clear, the decisions are easy. And when we've been in this old model, the facts have always been kind of like distant out there, or they've been buried somewhere way deep, or somebody had, most of the information and other people only had parts of the information, and they never were connected. And so everyone was just fearful, right? But what we're talking about here is you being able to have access to all the metrics, but anyone who you collaborate with, whatever shape or form that might look like, contract working, someone coming in as a team member, someone that you're looking to truly do a collaboration for an activity, for lead generation, whatever, you're going to be able to give everyone the same meaningful metrics so they can make a meaningful contribution, right? The old school was, listen, we'll give you, I remember having conversations with accounting. I used to get so mad, right? I'm like, I just need to see this information. They're like, oh, sorry, we don't share that. That's an internal metric only. It's just for the accounting department. I'm like, I wanted to pull my hair. Well, you see what happened. I did. I pulled a lot of my hair out. So today's technology, the leverage it provides is a Freedom of Information Act. It's like, hey, everybody, here's all the information. No longer do we have to be bogged down by these endless reports that are meaningless and yada, 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 all this kind of stuff. The relevant information can be narrowed down, distributed quickly and widely so that everyone can be able to can contribute to it.
Yes. And I'm telling you, the fourth trait of an agile business is their networks of empowered teams. So there is a clear, flat structure. What is it? These 6 metrics, man. We are all centered around these 6 metrics. And at the very core, the very hub of those metrics is what? The client. We are client centric, and we are driving results for one group of people in the world. Well, because of that clear, flat structure, people can move about in a virtual environment and actively contribute, which means department and tasks are not viewed as separate, but is interconnected. They're no longer in silos. They can operate without the other, but they can also operate within each other. So I know how the work I'm doing contributes to the work that you're doing is on the coaching side. And you know how the work you're doing contributes to this guy over here that is a contractor up in Canada. And I know how our work together contributes to this guy who's a contractor over in Nashville. I mean, the reality is we get to move around this virtual environment. I don't feel like I have to micromanage the silos. I am the agile manager that keeps all the people connected, because the North Star is the metrics, and I'm keeping us focused on why we're all doing this.
Yeah, Right on.
Right?
Man, I'm telling you, preach it. I'm telling you, I'm with you. You know what was at the center of the old model? You just said, at the center of this agile model is the customer. What was at the center of the old model was my department, right? Like my department. That was the thing to protect, right? And so you've had the friend who grew up in a house with like 6 kids, right? And so they come to the dinner table, and this kid, tells you the stories of like, boy, when we served dinner, like it was every man for himself. You had to guard your plate, and you had to slap the hand of the person that came too close to your food. And, that was kind of what this old structure produced, was this very guarded behavior. What came out of that, though, Amy, was a propensity for irresponsibility and a lack of accountability. It fostered blame shifting, like not my fault, your fault.
Yep.
I would have done it, but nobody told me. It just fostered this set of behaviors that when now we're living in today's environment, they no longer serve us well. They didn't serve us in the past. That was a whole fat illusion anyway. But you get what I'm saying. Like this idea that I can be absolved of responsibility or accountability is no longer true, because you do have the North Star that guides. You do have the metrics that tell you whether you're following. Now you have to take ownership of the action that will move you there. And there is visibility unlike you have ever seen before of whether or not you are taking ownership. You can't hide. You could hide in the old model. You can't hide in this model.
I'm just thinking about this idea of, it's moving away from this very pyramid style structural process where there's hierarchy, and down here every department is in silos. This is the reason why so many people are like, I'm not a marketer, let me just outsource it, because they don't see it as valuable to the whole. They see it in a silo.
That's right.
So they don't understand that the observation that you as the owner gather from that R&D, that research and development, will make or break the rest of the chain. They're all interconnected, whether you want them to be or not. I mean, I have said even recently with leaders of companies, and they're like, oh, all our departments except for this one are awesome. Sorry, man, not possible. You cannot be using technology, which every company is, and have silos. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to take an interconnected system and deconstruct it for your silo-based environment because it's more comfortable to you. But you're working with people that are trained by agile systems that are not in silos. So the organization or the team dynamic is always in conflict. It might not have trickled out yet, but it will when people start giving their resignations and they don't tell you why.
Sure. Yeah. You feel this tension. You feel this tension all along, even before that moment. You're just like, something, I just cannot quite put my finger on it, right?
Yes.
It's the inability to control everything that is being shouted back at you. That is that voice going, something has to change. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reality is that as solopreneurs, how this comes out is this doesn't feel natural to me. I feel like I'm trying to do something that I'm not good at. I just need to find somebody else to do this for me, or I tried this and it doesn't work for me. That's how this comes out.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. Me too. Okay. The fifth trait here, 5 of the 6, is role mobility. Again, this is dynamic people model. So there is a shared servant leadership at the core of an agile business team and an entrepreneurial drive. And you guys see that here. We demonstrate this to you every single day. Me as the owner found someone dynamic as Shane. And I said, Shane, I'm willing to pay you dynamically for your dynamic work. And together, you demonstrated the same behaviors that I want my team to share with me, which is first servant leadership, keeping the client at the center of what we do, and also an entrepreneurial drive that although you might be contracted by Ascend, you would think that you are a partner of Ascend because you've got that much entrepreneurial drive. You see the successes of the whole as your personal success.
Good description.
And that is a completely different mentality of employee.
Oh, Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I was thinking about this particular point, you know, when you were saying this idea of role mobility, right? Like you in the old way, it was always you had to be the expert, right? So we fostered this idea that we could only do certain things well, right? I've only been trained in this, I've only had experiencing this. When the truth is, in today's environment, you can gain the knowledge that you need and build the skill that's required for you to handle these aspects of the business that drive the interconnectivity of all the different departments. Now, eventually you may have to bring on additional people to help and support you in that. And when you do, there are three things those people are going to be looking for you from you, that if you haven't moved towards this agility type of a model that we're talking about, if you haven't become a person who is agile, you will not be able to deliver these three. Here's the first one. You have to be someone that other people look at and say, you know what? This person can actually help me. They can actually help me. What they are telling me needs to be done when I get stuck, they can get me unstuck so that I can keep moving. The second thing that people are going to want from you is they're going to need to want to know that you truly do care for them. Going back to the dumping versus delegating, whenever someone dumps a task on you, you know they don't care because they just say, hey, can you just go do this? Like you can tell, even in the tone of voice, the facial expression, the body language in which someone is interacting with you, whether or not they care. If you are not agile, when the yogurt of life hits the fan, you're going to be so tense and anxious and overwhelmed that you're going to dump on people and they're going to say, this person doesn't care about me, and they're not going to stay. The third and final thing is they're going to want to know, can you truly be trusted? Not can you say the right things, not can you make the right promises, but do you show up when you said you would, stay for as long as you said you would? And do you do that consistently, day in and day out? If people know that they can trust you, if you can actually help them solve their problems and you communicate through your actions that you truly care for them, boy, you're going to have people who rally around you and want to help you accomplish your goals.
And I'm telling you what, last but not least, a clear trait of these agile owners and agile business models is they just duplicate 1 through 5. They don't get outside of their lane of genius. They don't start going and poaching somebody else's client group because suddenly it looks like their client group responds faster than my client group, so I'm gonna go after those people. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And they are duplicating because the metrics tell them their North Star says you're on the right track. Do it again. Ditto. Do it again. Do it again. Duplicate. Yes.
Yep. You know, I would have people come to me at a conference or at somewhere where we were interacting with people who were at my former employer, you know, customers. And they'd say, hey, you know what you need to be doing. Or I'd meet some big influencer, right, at some place that we were. And they say, oh, you know what you guys need to do. And I'm telling you, this idea of being, you know, structured and all this kind of stuff, it really got crazy for me when I would hear that kind of stuff, because I had this massive FOMO that would kick in. I'm like, oh my, what am I going to miss out if I don't take Mark Miller at Chick-fil-A's idea on training and developing our people? What is going to happen? If I don't take this guy's idea about what's going to happen? Like, so what happened was when I listened to customers, it would just extend this product line further and further and further and further and further, like, till it was just, you know, it was just so far overextended that there was no value, right? And what I hear you saying is that scavenger from a previous pop-up we did, that scavenger type of activity, this fear of missing out always drives this scavenger mentality. And it culminates here with this idea of duplication, because I couldn't tell you what we did that produced the success. I was always searching for it month in and month out. Oh my, hope and pray that we can pull it off again this month. So that's the alternative. If you don't make this shift to an agile human, you will just live day in and day out with this total scramble and not knowing and continually guessing. But I'm telling you, the answer is right in front of you. You have access to the system that will get you off the crazy train and get you to the place where you can become the owner that you need to become, with the system that can be duplicated to get the results you want. So you got your time freedom back. You got the peace of mind you've been searching for. All those things got you into this business you're in the first place, right?
Yeah, and it truly is an agile business system. That's exactly what Ascend is. And the truth is that if you are listening, when people come along and say, you know what you should do, you should write a book. You know what you should do, you should do this. You know what you should do, you should do that. And you
People
don't
shooting all over you,
right? And they don't have those metrics that can speak to what you know to be success, or you don't have a North Star that is not have a dollar sign in the middle or does not have your face in the middle, you will fall for those shiny objects every single time, and your system will be clumsy, and it will be rigid, and it will be very slow. Your turnaround times for clients will be slow. Your cash flow growth will be slow. It is not possible to scale feelings. Not possible.
No.
Not possible. And I'm telling you right now, there are 40% of brands that say we want to put down agile business systems. But I'm going to tell you what, when you sit down with those people or they get into the Ascend work, you begin to see real quickly who really wants it and who's willing to adapt and adopt a new way of being in the world, because it requires you to change in every area. Because I guarantee if you're rigid and you're slow in business, you're rigid and slow in your marriage, with your children, you're rigid and slow in your decision making, you're rigid and slow around how you manage money, you're rigid and slow in how you view your faith, you're rigid and slow in everything. And what that does is it creates, because the world is moving at a faster pace, really, it creates this feeling of I'm missing out, I'm not doing something right, I'm behind, I'm doing all of these things, because it's not that you're not doing something, it's that you're not being someone.
Boy, that's big.
And that is the point here. If you're going to actually adopt agile business systems and solutions that are going to get you predictable profits, give you back time, help you help more people, and ultimately deliver that highest value, you have to change before you adopt and adapt a new system. I mean, last night on the Q&A call, Mark Delaney, who's always so courageous and brave to bring forth his vulnerability, said, hey, like awesome things are happening for me. Awesome things are happening for me, but I just wish that there was a CEO in my business to make all the business decisions, because I'm having too much fun delivering the model, but everything else is spiraling out of control. But I am changing the way I think. That's how you're moving towards agility. Is it requires a mindset shift, because you're acting in new ways. So we don't wait for the mind to change. We take action. The brain just physiologically makes changes along the way when we're in movement. And then what happens is then our behaviors follow after that. So now you're primed and ready for an agile business system.
So good. So good.
And I'm telling you, this is the intersection of good versus great owners and leaders, is they got to this intersection of rigidity and flexibility, of clumsiness and smooth, fluid flexibility like an acrobat. If you look up agile, there's a flexibility like an acrobat. And let me tell you something. When your brain is changing and it is grooving in new neural pathways, your body literally takes on the movement and the flexibility of a dancer. I've watched it in my own body. I went from moving very rigid and very tight, and where my muscles were all tensed up, to I can move like my toddler. I can turn my whole body in the same ways Abigail can. And she's got hyper flexibility in her muscles, but I can move like her because my brain has trained my body to move more beautifully, more flexibly, with more flexibility. Whereas before my body was rigid. That's what's happening in your business is I'm trying to move you from this rigid scientific management centralized way of doing things in phase one through the process of agility and flexibility and freedom, ultimately freedom to go and know that things will continue on the way you intended them to be. So I challenge you to listen to what we said, especially on these mindset shifts that Shane brought forward and ways for you to take action to say, am I being rigid or am I being flexible? And this is not about your values.
No.
This is not about compromising your values or your character. It is about looking and saying, am I functioning in this old way of I'm the only one? Or am I empowering people and trusting them to join me in this, or trusting the advice you're getting from Ascend? If you're still stuck in phase one and you've been with me longer than 30 days, you're rigid. You're
That's
rigid.
true, Roof. Right on.
I'm just telling you because I care too much to let you stay there. If you've moved beyond phase one and you're 60 or 90 days down the road, you're becoming less rigid. Well done. You know, we would keep going. If you just stopped at phase one, scientific management, you are ingratiated, you are centralized, everything rises and falls on you. You might have partners, but every partner is in a silo. I mean, these are just the traits, and they will kill you if another disruption happens. Just bring another economic disruption, another health concern, you come down, what's going to happen to the business? These are all things to consider as you are making these decisions. Is, are you setting up your legacy for future destiny or for future failure? So I really, really hope that this has been helpful today, and that you will take the advice and our own experience and you will implement it. And I see Israel has asked me, do we get the book? There is not a book. I'm not sure what you're asking. No book. This is Amy and Shane.
Just us.
I don't have a book to recommend, but the cover that I showed you, I've never read that book. It might be worth looking at early on in the video. You can go back and watch it again. So I hope you guys have a powerful weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Bye, guys.
See you, everybody. Bye-bye.